Hey everybody. So I've noticed a number of people are still struggling even with the conjunction rules, the introduction and elimination rules, and some people are even starting to mess with subproofs before even understanding these rules, or they're trying to incorporate subproofs just for the conjunction rules. With that is, I mean, that shows a complete misunderstanding of how the rules work. So I wanted to go ahead and give you a couple video, or this video where I go through a couple proofs of and elimination and introduction, just to see how I use these in a proof, and hopefully it'll be a lot clearer when you're attacking these yourselves. These are just two very simple rules that you should not be overthinking. So if after this video you still don't know how to do these proofs and they're not absolutely obvious on how to do these proofs, then you should be contacting me. Okay, right, so the first thing we do is we can always throw a new line down, right? That's how we start a proof. We need intermediate steps between our premises and our conclusion. The first thing to notice is that both of our premises are conjunctions, right? The main connective of both premise is an and symbol. So that tells me I'm allowed to do an and elimination on these, right? So the one thing to remember, I've gotten this question so many times, when can I do an and elimination? When can I do an or elimination? Yada, yada, yada. It's just about what's the main connective. If the main connective is an and, you're allowed to do an and elimination. Simple as that. Now, what does the and elimination get you? Well, it gets you one of those sides, right? So this sentence right here, premise one, let me go ahead and turn on step numbers. Premise one is telling you what? In English, it's telling you that A is true and B is true. So let me go ahead and, right? So this sentence in English says A is true and B is true. So if we're going to do an and elim, so let me go ahead and put my focus on 3. And I'm going to justify this rule with and elim, and I'm going to take it from 1. That means I have 2 choices on what I get on 3, right? All I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, here's this conjunction sentence that's telling me A and B are both true. So I'm allowed to either put A, or if I wanted, I could put B. Premise 1 tells me they're both true. And elimination is just you breaking off one of those sides to talk about it. So really, typically, whenever I see that I have a conjunction that's a premise, it's going to have a left side and a right side. So I'm actually going to do both. I'm going to first do the A part, and then I'm going to do basically the exact same thing. I'm going to do another and elimination from line 1 again to get the other side. Notice I'm not getting line 4 from line 3. I don't know B is true because A is true. That has nothing to do with it. I know B is true because premise 1 told me A and B are both true. So the idea here is all that and elimination is doing is it's just taking a conjunction, which is telling you, hey, 2 things are true. And all you're doing is saying, okay, here I'm going to talk about the one thing on one line, and I'm going to talk about the other thing on the other line. Now, why does this matter? Well, let's first go ahead and do the same exact thing to premise 2. We can go ahead and tear off the C, then we can tear off the D, and then both of these are going to be justified also by and elim, because all you're doing is tearing them off of 2 sides of the and. And both of these are going to have nothing to do with line 3, line 4, line 1. All that you're doing is you're taking line 2 and you're tearing off a side. And same thing on line 6. You're just taking line 2 and you're just tearing off the other side. So 3 and 4, all you did was just take line 1 and then tore its sides off. And that's what 3 and 4 are now, A and B. And same with 5 and 6. Now the point of this, now 3, 4, 5, and 6 are telling you A is true, B is true, C is true, and D is true. It's essentially the same thing as 1 and 2. So why did we do this? Well, now we can actually work with these things as atoms themselves. Remember, these rules are ridiculously strict about how you put things together. So if we want a conjunction at the end of the day, if we want a line that says, so I often will skip a bunch of lines and then put exactly what my conclusion is at the very end, because that's how every proof will have to end, is with your conclusion. Then the question is just, how do I fill in the gap? So at the end of the day, if I want a conjunction, well, one way of doing that is just doing an and intro, right? If I'm trying to get to an and sentence, I'm introducing that and symbol, but that's one way of doing it. How would I do this? How would I introduce the and? I would first have to find A on some line and then find D on some line, right? If I had just A on a random line and then D on a random line, all that 14 is going to do, all that and intro does, is take those two lines and stick them together with an and symbol in between. So then the question is just, okay, how do I get A and D on their own line? And then, oh, look at that. That's exactly what we've already done, right? That's exactly what I have on 6 and what I have on 3. So really the 4 and 5 here are extra. They're unnecessary steps in our proof. It doesn't make it wrong, but it just means you wasted your time maybe, or you're a little more careful than you needed to be. But all that I'm doing in order to get line 7, in order to get this conclusion, I'm just introducing an and intro. The point of this rule is just to say, hey, anytime you already believe one thing and you already believe another thing, you can just put those two things together and say, I believe one thing and the other thing. So all I'm going to do is point out, I believe the one thing and I believe the other thing. And by and intro, that means I believe this. And lo and behold, oh, we have a mistake. So, oh, I chose and intro here and not and elim, which I'm sure some of you realized during the video, but I will not be doing any edits, so that's why that's staying in. So that sort of thing is going to happen. That obviously that happens to even me, who's done a million of these. The point is to be able to, as you're going through, when you see those sorts of mistakes, you need to be able to understand each step that you've made, so that way you can go back and say, oh yeah, that's why that's not the right rule. I just misclicked. If you're going through these proofs and you're just randomly guessing which lines justify which, when you hit those mistakes, you're going to have absolutely no clue what to do. So that's a good opportunity to see that. Okay, let's go ahead and move to another one. And I'm just going to be basically, this is all just about and intro and elim. And one thing to remember or notice about this is at no point am I going to use a single subproof, because doing intro and elim for and has nothing to do with subproofs. You can do it inside a subproof, but that's just you working inside a subproof. It has nothing to do with the subproof itself. So make sure you understand these rules before you even try to touch subproofs. So again, the first thing I always do, although I didn't do it the most recent time right away, is I throw the conclusion right in at the end of the sentence. Because again, that's how every proof needs to end. You need to be landing on your conclusion. Hey, if you start with the premises, I'll land you with the conclusion. You'll end with the conclusion. So I'm going to throw that right down at the end. All right. Now, a good way, if you have a conclusion that's a conjunction, one way to do that, again, I'm saying one way, and this is a good idea, good plan to start with, is to think, okay, all I need to do is do an and intro. And so all I need to do is somehow find this side and then find this side. So right now I'm going through a technique where I'm in a sense walking backwards. I'm thinking, how would I get to my conclusion? And then I'm thinking about, okay, well now how could I get there? So the idea is if I could get A on its own line, and I could also get C or B on its own line, then on this conclusion, all I would need to do is take A, take C or B, and I stick them together with the and intro. And that's all that I would need to do for that line. See, that line gets a check. If I check the whole proof, no, I don't get it because I haven't actually gotten my A and B, right? So now the idea is these are my goals, because as soon as I get to these, then I'll get to the conclusion. Okay. And then you can ask yourself, okay, well, how do I get to A? And that should, again, just be very simple. Look, you have a premise that has A as a conjunct of a conjunction, right? So premise one, I'll go ahead and show step numbers again. Premise one is saying A is true and D or C is true. So in order to get this A, all that we need to do is say, okay, and I mean, we can skip the lines wherever. All that I need to do is say, okay, I'm going to eliminate the and off of 1, meaning I'm tearing my A off of 1, right? I get to tear off either side I want. In this case, I want to tear off 1. Boom, beautiful. 11, it's the same. It's the, well, actually, we don't even need to get C or B on a new line. We already have it right here. So we actually didn't. If you want, you can go ahead and press re-it. I mean, that's totally fair. And you're reiterating line 2. That's cool. But actually, this is totally useless. If for line 11, all that I need to do is I need to cite A and I need to cite C or B. So all of this in the middle stuff is completely pointless, right? So here are my two premises. All I did was tear off A from one, and then I stuck together A and C or B to get my conclusion. So again, so that if it was confusing my working backwards, let me go ahead and just do it fresh so you can see it's the same thing. It's the same thing, except you're just thinking in the other direction. I don't pretend there isn't a rule here, right? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to notice, oh, my premise is a conjunction. Okay, let's tear off the sides of my premise and elim from one. And then if you want to be super safe and tear off both sides, you can go ahead and do that. And where would I get line 2 for, or line 4 from? Would also be line 1, and this would also be an and elim. So you can do that just fine. And then at the very end, again, my conclusion is just C or B and A. So I'm just going to stick together line 2 with line 3, because that's the C or B part, and that's the A part. And I'm just going to stick them together with and intro. So I get C or B and A. Okay. And I didn't cite a rule, but all I'm doing, again, if you ever forget to put the thing in, you should be able to go back and just ask yourself, what did I just do? Well, I took these two things and I stuck them together with an and. So that's all that this rule is I introduced an and, right? If you're building an and, it's and intro. If you're just deconstructing an and, it's and elim. Perfect. Okay, now some of you might be wondering, what about this line right here, line 4? You didn't have that in the first time you did the proof. Well, ultimately, there's plenty of things that you can do in a proof that are going to turn out to be, or that you can do in a proof that are actually not going to be helpful. And in this case, this is one of them. It's totally fine that I got line 4, but the fact of the matter is deleting line 4 isn't going to change my proof at all, right? Because when I had line 4, that didn't actually, if you follow the line of reasoning, line 4 didn't actually occur in any later line of the proof. 5 and if there was a 6, 7, and 8, none of them cited line 4, which means it's unnecessary. But that's a little bit more subtle thing to keep. The real thing to keep in mind is just when you have an and sentence, you're allowed to tear it apart. And it's a good rule of thumb to tear off both, even though you might not need both. And then and intro lets you just stick two things together. Okay, last thing on this one is just number 2. Am I allowed to do an and elim here? And you should already be thinking, well, no, because why? You can only do an and elim if you have an and as the main connective. And here, or is your main connective. So I cannot do an or an and elim here. Here, I would have had to do an or elim if I wanted to do that. Luckily, because of how I designed this proof, I didn't need to do that. In probably the next video, assuming I do one, I'll explain when you do need to do an or elim. In this case, I just needed the or sentence that stayed whole all the way down to my conclusion, right? That whole thing occurs in my conclusion. So there was no need to break it apart. Okay. That was a lot on this very simple proof, but just hopefully you're seeing all that I did was break one into its pieces and then stick the right pieces together in order to get to 5. Okay, last proof I want to show you today is this one. All right, so let me make the font bigger again. Okay, and right. All right, so for this one, apparently that didn't work too well. So for this one, again, we just ask ourselves first. So you can do it in either way. I always think it's helpful to, even if you don't want to work all the way backwards, you should at least put whatever the conclusion is at the end. And I won't confuse you with trying to work backwards and trying to think, well, what would get me there right now? Though that is something we should try to get familiar with later. Right now, though, I just want to focus on getting familiar with the, that is a J, just for whatever reason, it's cutting off the bottom. I just want to get you familiar with the and intro and elim rules. So again, you have two premises. What is the main connective of premise 1? It is an and. And if you don't see that, well, then your issues are before proofs. They are with truth tables and with translations. So all that we're going to do, when I see that I have an and as a premise, I think, great, that gives me material. That gives me raw materials to work with. I'm just going to tear it apart, and I'm going to give myself the left and the right side both on their own lines. That's all I'm going to do here. I think this might say V right there. So I'm just going to get the left side on its own line, and then I'm going to get the right side on its own line. And both of these, again, are just saying, hey, take line 1 and then eliminate the and then take the other side of line 1 off. Again, all I'm doing is eliminating the and. So again, you'll often see and elim come in pairs as you tear the left side off first and then the right side off. Okay, now I've torn that apart. And now in premise 2, what's the main operator there? It's also an and. So I'm going to tear off those sides too. And all of this, if you want to be clever and think about where you're going, you might be able to see that I actually don't need to tear off each side every time because one of the sides isn't going to be useful, right? That's what happened in the last proof. We found out that tearing off the D or C side was completely pointless. And the same thing can happen here. But if you're not comfortable with that sort of thing, then just every time tear off both sides. It's not going to hurt you. You can still use the original premise. You can use whichever side you want. And you don't have to use any line that you get. You just have to make sure any line that you get was gotten safely. Okay, so we've gotten all 4 parts. Let's go ahead and justify these. So 5 and 6, both are the 2 sides of 2. So I'm going to cite 2 for both of those. And all I'm doing, again, is just tearing them off. And when you think tearing off an and, you're just thinking and elim. Okay, now I have a whole bunch of raw materials. Now ask yourself, what does the conclusion need? Well, the conclusion just needs that you put one of those things together with J, right? It just says, oh, we'll take P or R. I've got that one. And smack it together with J. I got that one too, right there. So this one, I can just say, oh, all I'm doing, again, you're sticking things together. So now it's and intro. And what are you introducing the and between? You're introducing it between line 3 and line 6, or the contents of line 3 and the contents of line 6. You're saying, hey, on line 3, you said you believed P or Q was true. And then on line 6, you said you believed J was true. So then on line 13, all I'm going to do is point out, hey, you said this is true and that is true. That is the only thing going on with and intro. It is maybe the simplest rule that we have. And I mean, the only one that's close is and elimination. So again, hopefully this makes a lot more sense now in terms of how everything here is justified, right? And this maybe should make you appreciate the program a little more. I know they can be problematic, but if you go through any of these proofs, you should be able to just tap through with your cursor and then you see, oh yeah, okay, A comes from the red line. Yep, that's why I know A. B also comes from that. C comes from line 2, correct. D comes from line 2, right? And then A and D is just me sticking together A and D. And same thing right here, right? I know A from line 1, I just tore off A. D or C, I just tore off the other side. And then again, the red lines, all I'm doing is sticking them together here. And then finally, again, 3, all I did was from 1. 4 was from 1. And again, I'm just watching the red line. I'm just watching where the highlighted region is. Same with 5 and same with 6. So hopefully it gives you a sense of better how to follow through, how the program is helping you follow through the structure of the reasoning. At any point, you should be able to click a line and say, okay, the reason why I know this is true is because of these 2 things up here. The reason why I think this is true is because of these ones up here. That's the point of that's the point of proofs in general, and that's what you need to be getting very clear with. These and intro and elim rules make it as simple as it's ever going to get, as simple as really anything's ever going to get. You're just saying, okay, you're giving me some pieces, let me tear them apart in the right way and put them together in the right way. Don't think about subproofs at this point, because notice we didn't do a single subproof here. I'll hopefully do another video where I'll talk about subproofs. But for now, email me if you have any questions about this. These sorts of things you should be super comfortable with already. Okay.